Welcome to Can I Get a Retake, where education meets innovation. Every month, we host conversations with the thinkers, teachers, and researchers shaping the world around us. We hope you tune in, get inspired, and join the conversation. Welcome to Can I Get a Retake? Today, we're joined by Dr. Jeanette Mokry, Associate Professor of Mathematics at Dominican University. With a background in both mathematics and secondary education, she brings a deep passion for pedagogy and student success. Her research explores innovative teaching strategies like peer-led learning and inquiry-based methods. She's also the author of College Algebra Functions and Applications, published with Great River Learning.
Welcome to the podcast today, Jeanette. It seems to me it makes sense to really just start at the beginning. So could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you and your journey into mathematics and academia?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Deanna. So I'm Jeanette Mokry, and honestly, I feel like I've wanted to be a teacher for almost as long as I can remember. And I've been thinking about that a lot right now because I have two young children in elementary school, and we have that fun conversation of what do you want to be? And you can be anything. And I just loved school. I really did. I liked going, I liked learning. I looked forward to it, I think. And I wanted to be a teacher. The what, I guess I didn't know because as an elementary school student, you don't even know what all is out there. But I just thought, I want to do this. I want to go to school every day and I want to be a teacher. And then I got to middle school and math started to get a little hard. And I think that that's an important thing as an educator to have had a struggle at some point because you're going to have students who do. And maybe in a different way than you, but being able to recognize that that's okay, that's natural, and how are we going to come to the other side? So I remember just one night doing math homework, telling my dad, I'm so confused, come help me. And he explained it. He explained it a little differently and it clicked. And so I share that a little bit because that could have been a moment where I thought, this is hard. I'm confused and give up and think of something else. Maybe be a different kind of teacher or who knows what. But that's just a really nice memory for me about my dad just supporting me and recognizing that sometimes that's what you need. You need another voice to come in. And then high school came and I had the great opportunity to be in some advanced classes and still just really love it. And that's when I started to recognize that I could help other people with, I guess I'll say my talent. I don't want to, sound too braggy, but I did well, right? I mean, you tend to not study something that you're struggling with. So I was doing well and helping classmates. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to teach high school math. And so that was my plan. Went to college looking for a school that had a math program, a good education program, and was going to be a high school teacher. I did my student teaching. I took my test. I got my license. That was the plan. And I was going to graduate and go get a job, make money. And again, being blessed with great teachers, they encouraged me to go to graduate school. I didn't even know what that meant, what that was. It wasn't something that my parents had experience with. It wasn't a conversation we had. And from a fairly young age, I knew what I was going to do. So there was no point in having that conversation. But my advisor in college sat down with me. He explained it. He supported me through the application process and just said, give it a try. We think you could do this. And then not to go on too much longer, I went to graduate school. That's where I struggled some more. And I kind of saw, again, okay, things can get hard. Don't give up. Had to kind of lean on some others, family, friends to just support me through that. But I also got to teach as a graduate student. And so that was a really nice way to solidify. I didn't have to step, away from that for 5-6 years and hope that that's what I was working for. So that was just a great juxtaposition for me in terms of where I went, that I could work with undergraduates and kind of shift that. I want to be a high school teacher. I don't know if I want to deal with high school. There's it's a very different realm there. There's parents and principals and less choice from the students. They kind of have to show up. And in college, they chose that. And I just kind of liked the environment there. And I saw it through and
Do you have any,
was really
any
lucky
advice
to
for
land
potential
this
students
job that I
might
have
be
right now at
listening who are
Dominican
in a similar
University,
position
straight
where they
out
like
of graduate school.
but they don't really have
And
experience going
I
and
went to a liberal
furthering
arts
it, doing a
undergrad. I'm
graduate
working at
degree.
one.
What would
And
you
so
say
just
to
to
them?
kind of come back to what kind of helped me. believe in myself, right? And say, I can do this. This is a good path. So that's just kind of what landed me to this career. I just always, like I said, I loved school. I loved learning, and how nice that that can be something I get to experience almost every day still. I would say ask questions, find a faculty member, because I think that helps. A faculty member is going to know you. They're going to know what you've been through, and then hopefully that can kind of help with that relationship, and the student will hopefully have a little more buy-in and believing that advice that's coming from someone who knows them. Get some information. I One of my concerns about going to graduate school was, I need to go make money now. How can I pay for school? And I didn't realize that there were teaching assistantships and stipends, and that financial burden wasn't really going to be a burden. So I think just asking those questions and being forthcoming with someone that has some experience and exposure to the opportunities for you about what your concerns or hesitations might be. I also teach in an area where a lot of people tend to stay nearby. Chicago's a great place. I can understand not wanting to stray far, but also just broadening your horizons and realizing that that's just such an amazing time to go see a new part of the country, the world, perhaps, that this is a great time to choose you and where you might want to go. And it's okay to maybe venture to another state, another time zone, and that there'll be support there. So just to ask questions, maybe do some research, get some guidance though if you feel like you don't know where to begin, because there's so many different programs out there, so many different schools, big, small. I'm very personality driven. And so the other thing I would say to someone who's thinking about it, see if you can go there and walk around the town and see how you feel. Can you go meet some students? Because that also really helped me feel good about where I was going to be for the next few years, and that I wasn't going to be by myself, and just have a better understanding of what it really was, since I didn't have someone close to me that could, relay their own experience.
We learned a little bit about the background and how you got to where you are. What keeps you inspired now, today, as a teacher and a researcher?
Well, one of the things I think that keeps me going is that my teaching and my research are kind of intermingled now, and that's really nice. I was in graduate school, found a project to get my dissertation, worked on it, and proud of it. But that's not where my passion was. I studied secondary education. That was always just really high on my priorities and my passion. So my recent research has all been related to teaching and learning and pedagogy. And so I think one of the things that keeps me going as a researcher is that it's embedded in my work. It's there, and just kind of finding ways to try new things, examine them, and see how they're going. That's been really rewarding. And I think my colleagues as well, I have collaborated with colleagues. And I think that that's nice. A lot of people, I think, picture mathematicians maybe more so than other sciences who you might picture in a lab with a lot of people. They might think we are just alone at our desks, and the research I'm doing of late is not isolating. And I think that that also helps. As I said, I'm personality driven. I like being around people. That's one of the nice things about teaching. So that really helps with the research, and that I've been able to try some things. And again, just asking questions, didn't even think that that was research when I first started, that you can do that. You can take some data, try something new, and see if it's having an impact. And so that's helping me in terms of the research aspect and continuing to examine and explore in that way. And then with the teaching, it's the fact that I'm still learning. I learn from the students. And those are some of the best days when they say something, I hadn't thought of it that way, or a question that I had never even thought of the answer to. There's still just so much that I want to learn, and they keep me going. Obviously, we have highs and lows in anything we do, and teaching is no exception, but just those moments where a student also says, I get it. Or they come in that first day and they're nervous, and then maybe it takes till the last week, but they turn it around and they say, okay, I got it. So getting to be a part of those moments, but also recognizing that there's some students who still aren't having those, and they make me want to keep doing that research, exploring what can we do to help you, what's going to work to make you feel less anxious. What other way can I say that's going to click? I feel like they keep me working harder because
That is really nice.
there's
And I know that you've done
even when
some
people think of
research
math
on
perhaps as very black
peer-led
and white,
team
there are
learning,
sometimes
specifically in
multiple ways to
college
say something.
algebra.
So let me try
What
again. Let
are
me
some of
keep
the
trying.
takeaways that you've
So I
gotten from
feel like
that? Is there
they're
anything that
pushing
really
me in a
surprised you
good
with how
way.
students have
So
responded
just
to that?
and that it's not the same. Every day's different. Every day's probably a surprise because I only have so much control over what's going to happen. So it's also just a really interesting career in that way. Different set of students, and we all get to try again. And I think that's kind of nice. It's been really rewarding and interesting to examine that. Some colleagues got a grant, which was so lucky for me to be a part of what they were bringing to Dominican, which is allowing peers to attend class, engage with students during group work, and then meeting with them weekly to just go deeper into some challenging topics. So that's kind of just an overview of what this peer facilitated learning is for those who, might not be familiar with the jargon. But what my colleague Sarah Quinn and I discovered, so we examined this together, as I mentioned, right? My colleagues, they keep me going. They've been wonderful partners on this journey, that this had been used a lot in more advanced classes. So bringing it to college algebra, we didn't realize how new it was in terms of that bigger picture. And for us, so many of our students go through that. So it was interesting to kind of see word of mouth, I think, was a little surprising to me. The way that we foster it at my university is students are required once a week to go to a session. We call it a workshop led by a peer. And the faculty member and the student peer facilitator, they work together to think about what good topics are. But that's an extra hour of math each week that's kind of mandated. And students were opting in. It also helped that it was being done kind of, I'll say, across the STEM fields, chemistry, biology. So there was a lot of word of mouth, not just within mathematics, but I was a little surprised that students were seeking it out and being happy about it. Certainly not all, but that was a pleasant surprise that people recognize the value in it. And I think not necessarily surprised, but happy that what we wanted to happen did, which is there was more community. That was the hope, to kind of foster community. They're working in small groups, getting to know their classmates. Like I said, mathematics is not does not have to be, and I think should not be, you working alone. So kind of helping these students, a lot of them are freshmen in college algebra, getting to know their classmates, hopefully feeling comfortable, talking to each other, thinking out loud. And I think it also reiterated that, yes, this is challenging. We want to provide this extra help for you because I feel like a lot of times someone might think it's me. I'm the reason why something is challenging. But no, we're saying more broadly, this can be a challenging topic. We might need more time. And so hopefully that also helps open that up for students. But anytime I can kind of acknowledge this is hard, this is challenging, or I remember asking myself these kinds of questions to hopefully help open them up because they might have to ask some questions to get that deeper understanding. So I would say that last part, not necessarily a surprise, but something I wanted to see. And it was really nice to just see the students getting to know each other more in class because they had that extra time and seeing them connect with the peers. Sometimes they don't want to ask me the questions, and try not to get sad about it and take it personally, but be glad that they found another resource that can help them through the journey of the course.
So, besides the peer led team learning, what other trends in mathematics pedagogy are you most excited about now?
So another thing that I try to do along with the peer facilitated learning and then some other classes is just more active learning. And that's really is a buzz phrase. I wouldn't say it's necessarily new, but it's still thankfully still a hot topic, if you will, pedagogically. I started that in my more advanced courses, just thinking they'd be more open to participating. Maybe they're a math major and they can see the value. I don't need to get the buy-in as more. It won't be as challenging to get a buy-in from them. But I saw just such value that I started kind of bringing it to lower classes, my calculus class, and then even with the college algebra. So I'm excited about just students helping to create their own knowledge, whether we think of it as active learning, inquiry-based learning, discovery learning, just some way where it's not just here's a question and I'm going to tell you the answer. But just that they have to put in that thought. And I feel like if you know the story behind the answer, that's going to help you when the question changes. I don't want someone to be able to answer this one question or these five questions, but kind of see commonalities, understand process. So anything that's getting the students engaged and stepping away from lecture excites me. And so many in my department are doing that in a variety of their classes as well. So I think that's really exciting. So the mastery-based grading has been topics at a lot of conferences I've been to. And like I said, I want to learn more about it. It's something I'm excited to engage more in
I can
terms
really
of
see the
dialogue and
importance of
reading,
mastery-based
because I
education
think
in a
that that's
world
a
of
way
artificial
to help
intelligence, where
the
people are
students,
using it
encourage them,
to,
and also let them
counterbalance
kind of
some of the
see that
original multiple
maybe this
choice
is a weak
questions and other
point,
things that
but
we
this is a
usually
strength.
use to,
Because I feel like there always
quantify
needs to be that
talent or
coupling.
quantify
I'm always hoping when
understanding.
I have to
So I
maybe
think that's great
make
that
an edit
you're looking
on
into
feedback
that.
for an exam, that there's also a place where I can say, great job. We want to be able to have that balance. A misstep here, but a big step in the right direction there.
That's especially good for people who just
Yeah,
have,
thanks. And, and
need
and
different
along
learning
with that, right, just
accommodations. It's
varied
just
forms of
easier for them to
assessment, that it
express
doesn't have
themselves in
to
different ways
be
and different
even
methods.
pen
So
it
the more
on
that we can
paper,
do
but
to really
maybe
help
doing
them
some kind of
express themselves,
dialogue,
I
some
think
oral assessments
the
that we
better the
can kind of
education
see what
system will
comes up and let things kind of organically go. And you never know what a student might say
beyond,
to
the
surprise you and let you
content
realize, oh,
knowledge and
they
the
have a deeper
mastery.
understanding
Are there any
because they're
particular
able to
broader skills
articulate
or ways of thinking
and
that
kind
you
of have
want your
that
students to
follow-up rather
carry
than
with
just what
them
they put
even
down on a
after
piece
they've
of
taken
paper.
your
So yeah, there's
course?
so much out there.
In the long run.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I think one that I kind of touched on in an earlier response is just kind of seeing commonalities, noticing trends, patterns. There's so much of that in mathematics. So that if something is new in the sense that we haven't seen that exact question before, that concept, is there something we can relate it to? So just kind of seeing some connections. A big thing that we tell our mathematics majors is people are going to want you. They're going to see you have a mathematics degree and they're going to know that you're a critical thinker. So obviously that's a huge broad term, but just being able to look at a problem and start dissecting it, hopefully, being able to kind of break things down. We do a lot of word problems. That's one of the things that I wanted to make sure the textbook was rich in, was applications. And so going through that and reading it, maybe reading it again, dissecting it, translating. So I think critical thinking, but also in that sense of problem solving, not walking away, trying, giving it a try, I think would be another skill. So it's well beyond just the quantitative aspect for sure, but being able to read something and not being afraid to try, I think is another thing there. Try something and hopefully also being kind of careful. I talked to them about that. We were solving equations in my class today and talked about checking our answer, being aware of that. Obviously, we can't do it everything, but check your answer. And then if it's not working out, retrace your steps, being careful and kind of, I think, also just learning from that. I talked to them about something. I always hesitate when I put things out there. Don't do this. Caution, caution, because I've seen students or myself make certain mistakes, and I'll also then talk to them about a mistake I made. And I said, I'll never forget it because I got that paper back. And so it's okay to make a mistake. Just learn from it. So hopefully they can get that as a bit of a takeaway as well. I still make mistakes in my teaching and my mathematics on the board, and just hope someone's awake and notices when I do that too. So just learning from our mistakes, because I'm sure that we'll all be making them during our class together.
Well, and it makes you more real too when the students see that, oh, you are human. You do have mistakes as well, that it's, not all peaches and cream just being the instructor up front in the class.
Yes, exactly. I've never made a mistake on purpose. I have heard that some people do that, partly to either humanize themselves or just make sure that the students are paying attention. I've never made a mistake on purpose. If I make one, it was a slip up. But yes, exactly. And sometimes I'll catch my own mistake. I'll get a few lines down in my work, and I always kind of have something beside me just to kind of help catch my mistakes. And I'll say, oh, goodness, that was supposed to be a negative. And I said, "Is that why you were making that face at me?" To a student, you see them. I mean, that's one of the things I like about being in the classroom. And I'll say, please point it out. So I agree, and I like that humanization. I want them to know that I mean, yes, I'm at the front of the board, but I make mistakes too. And if they can be gentle and kind with me, I'm trying to return that if a mistake is on the other end. Yeah.
So, are you finding that students today are more or less prepared for the complexities of mathematical thinking? And how has your teaching approach evolved to meet any of those changes?
Well, I hate to say this, but I don't think they're more prepared. And I want to couple that by saying, obviously, we all lived through a pandemic and we're all still at various stages of that, depending on, how it's affected us personally, professionally. But here we are in 2025. So our students that are coming in, I mean, they were at such a prime time in their education. And I think I'm not very in touch with the high schools in the area to say what was even happening locally, but we all kind of had to pivot and make a turn there. And the students did as well. And that was really challenging. And so for our seniors that just walked across, right, their senior year of high school was not necessarily an exciting time for them as they were, distanced from people. So I think that that's played a bit of a role, that the instruction might have been provided to our students in a way that wasn't necessarily best for them. I found remote learning to be a real struggle. I'm so happy to be back in the classroom. Or also just what kind of environment were they around? Were they alone? As I said, I think interacting with our peers when we're learning is so helpful. So I do think, unfortunately, we're still feeling that a little bit. And that we have a lot of ebb and flow that I see in the classroom in terms of preparedness. And I wonder just what else might have been going on in their lives during that time and what kind of message was being sent about education. I grew up really blessed that my parents really valued it. They were very supportive of all of us in terms of our journey for college. My siblings and I all have an advanced degree, and we had that support. But we also were privileged in that we didn't have other responsibilities. And so I say that in part because I only am exposed to my students and their experiences. And I do fear that just some of their other obligations, unfortunately, can make it challenging for them to put in the time that they need. So I don't think it's necessarily about their ability. And so I appreciate the way you phrase that question, the preparedness, right? Because those are two very different things. And so I think there just needs to be a lot of support. I have been thinking about that as I prepare for my classes and come to my classes. And I think just slowing down my explanations and going through more detail than I maybe did. I just finished my 16th year of teaching than I was 16 years ago, or as I mentioned, when I was a graduate student. I don't take anything for granted. And I've always tried to kind of show up on day one with no assumptions of the knowledge that we're going to be exposed to. There's a prerequisite for just about every class I teach, but anything that we are going to explore together, I'm going to assume that that's our first time. And I know that'll be different. So I've always done that, but I think I write a lot more on the board than I used to. I used to just say things and, did you hear that? And every now and then I say, that was important. I'm going to write that down because I know that our students mirror that a little bit more. And so I'm writing a lot more on the board. And just one change that I think is great for our students is they have technology that I did not have when I was in college. There was no Khan Academy. There was no YouTube, I don't think. I mean, I was just learning the internet at the time. And so what I have had students do, and it doesn't bother me at all, I appreciate it, is they'll take pictures of the board. And so not only am I writing it down as a way to say, I think this is important enough for you to hear and see, but then that's also giving them that opportunity. They can capture it, they can take it with them. That our board work can become, I'm trying to think of a good phrase, but that board work can get carried with them. I erase it, but they've still got it. So
Mhm.
just being a little bit more mindful, I think, of the level of detail that I am showing as opposed to just verbalizing.
Yeah,
Trying to
when
think about the
you
different
sat
types of
down and were
learners as
inspired
well,
to write
because
your
I do
title,
sometimes
College
worry
Algebra
when they
Functions
look
and
back, if they didn't
Applications,
write it
was
down,
there a
are they
particular
going to be able
challenge
to
or a set of
remember the
student
words
needs
that
that
went
you
along
felt
with
other
it?
titles
So
weren't
just saying a
addressing?
lot more, and then just encouraging the questions, doing a lot more of, as I was mentioning before, saying, I think this is kind of challenging. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying it to say, I'm expecting questions. Ask the questions. So just kind of hopefully opening it up a little bit more. Yeah, I think the real challenge we were having as a department was finding what we would call a non-traditional college algebra textbook. I mean, this is an old subject, and it's also one that some of the students, as I mentioned, may have been exposed to. I like to treat it as new. And as the title suggests that I chose, having kind of that function and application focus was really what we were struggling with. It was a lot of solve an equation, here's a graph, but not necessarily seeing the connections. And then also, as silly as this might sound, even the order of the content in the book wasn't always quite what we wanted. And certainly, as an instructor, you have a choice. You do not have to do chapter one, two, three, four. It's written with that intention, obviously. And I've read books where authors will kind of have a diagram in the front, if you want to skip, or here's a way you can go through it differently. But it just didn't always, we were having a hard time finding the flow, I think, in terms of chapter one, two, three, and so on. But then also just that focus of there's a reason for this, there's connections. And so that was really a big motivator for me in terms of the approach that I took, and then kind of trying to highlight that in the title, for someone who would perhaps be looking for something that's non-traditional in a good way, that's really focusing on the functions. And I have taught our curriculum knowing what comes before college algebra and what comes after. So also just trying to kind of think of going beyond where they're coming from, because there's a lot of overlap when we're in the developmental math courses, so students can get those ideas reinforced, but also really wanting to feel like I'm preparing them for where they're headed next. So trying to think of a variety of applications and mixing it up, not just real world applications, but also thinking about the different majors that our students are studying. Because when my colleague and I were looking into the peer facilitated learning and we did some research there, we had questions about seeing connections between the course and their major, and students weren't seeing it. That was a disappointment. And so that was something that I really carried with me. But once that decision had been made, that was definitely something I wanted to do to kind of make it stand out a little bit, and also hopefully help our students when they went on to their next course, whether it be math, biology, chemistry, already starting to see kind of the inner workings and what content they were going to be building on, but seeing it a little bit in the math class as well. Sometimes we feel so siloed, like everyone's relying on us and we don't get to have the fun sometimes, or the students aren't seeing the connections. So I wanted to be able to have a little bit of fun there and bring in some other disciplines. And I learned a lot along the way, borrowed some textbooks from some colleagues in biology and chemistry. So that was really fun for me too. There were connections that I hadn't even realized as I was kind of picking through some of those other content textbooks. It was really nice.
So you actually already touched on the next question I have, and that was making the connection for the students between what they were studying and what they were going to study. What were the other goals that you had for yourself, for the students, and for your department when you created the title? And now that you've used it for a year, do you feel that you're reaching them?
So I would say, first and foremost, I was kind of driven to take this project on to support my colleagues. So they were kind of the first audience I was thinking about. We were trying to find a book that met certain needs, but also that was user friendly from the faculty standpoint. What's great about this textbook is there are all of these built-in assessments, and wanted to make sure that that was not a burden for the faculty, that these online assessments are meant to be a positive feature. And so one of my goals was that it was going to be user friendly for my colleagues, that it wasn't going to be cumbersome to learn this new platform. I learned the new platform along the way, of course, but that it was user friendly and that the approach taken was one that they could kind of pick up on and carry through. And then also at the same time that it wasn't super directive, that they wouldn't feel like the textbook was forcing them to take a certain approach in their classes. And I do think I've met that goal just from talking to colleagues about how they're using the assessments. Deanna knows from our many conversations over the past 2 years that one of my favorite parts about the textbook is these knowledge checks throughout the chapter. And faculty can choose to have them as a pre-read, like a pre-assessment read through, come to class having thought about it, how's that going, maybe a post-assessment from the class. So I wanted a book that the students could also have as a pre-read or as a afterword. I remember one of my professors had me read, that was our homework, and I did it to read before class. And I would come to class so confused. I just couldn't learn from the textbook. And so I wanted a textbook that I hoped students could learn from. Not that I wanted to replace the wonderful interactions in the classroom, but that it spoke to them, that they could kind of pick up on it. And it wasn't something that they had to kind of read after the fact. That they could, of course. I think most textbooks are always okay after you've got that foundation and kind of helping make more connections, more examples, that kind of thing. But I wanted it to be something that would be an okay first exposure,
Mhm.
that it didn't need some prior understanding beforehand. But I do know that at least some of them are reading the textbook based on some things that they've shared with me. So I think I've met the goal in terms of helping my colleagues. We're all a lot more tech savvy, I think, than we were a decade ago. So I think they bring something in that regard before even looking at the textbook. But I think that, like I said, they're making it their own. They're not feeling like they have to do anything a particular way. I had a colleague come to me and actually say she hadn't thought about explaining a particular topic in the way that I did, and she really liked that approach in the book. And so exposing them also to some things maybe that they hadn't thought about. Again, it can be an alternate to the way that they're approaching it in their classroom, of course. So I wanted the students to feel like it was readable and spoke to them. I think I have another thing I really wanted was that those examples, and just what a perk of an interactive textbook. I was one of the latecomers to anything that's technology. I'm not the first. I'm like one of the last. But I see such a benefit to having this interactive digital platform, and I've been pushing this with my students, that the examples they have these drop downs so that the
Mhm.
student doesn't see all of the details. And so they can kind of read that example again if they're doing it after class as a post. I want to, get a few more examples. They can think about it before looking at all of the details, looking at the answer. They can kind of open it up. And I just think that's a really neat way for the students to hopefully be honest with themselves, but get that check in on how they're doing outside of class, if perhaps they're not able to go and check with their instructor. I honestly didn't have a lot of goals for myself. I think I was just, ironically, this has been a goal of mine just professionally. I thought, wouldn't it be great to write a textbook one day? And somehow the stars aligned and we were able to come together. So for me, it was, I guess, just a goal of getting it done, just thinking you wanted to do this and you have this
Mhm.
opportunity. And that was really all that I was hoping for, was to see it through and be proud of it. And I am. I'm really proud of the
Mhm.
work that we were able to do together. And I think also that it's a living piece. Right? It's digital.
Is there
There's been
any,
some
if another
tweaks, some edits that
instructor
have been
or
coming
department
up
chair
at
is
various
talking about
points.
architecting their
And that's
own
hard for me
course,
because
is there any
I like to
advice you
see
could give
things the first
to
time through.
them
It's great,
on how
but this
to
is a
start
project that's
writing, how to,
ongoing. And I
create
think
their
that
content, or even
that's
how to
something
organize
that
it?
is comforting to me, since it was such a new endeavor, that we are able to kind of continue to work and explore as we get feedback from others. And it's been a great journey. It was a really just amazing opportunity. I'm so appreciative that I got to do that. Yeah, I mean, the beginning, it feels very daunting and overwhelming for sure. And I think recognizing, especially if it's a partnership like this where it's that digital platform and it's ever evolving, to kind of recognize that for yourself right from the start, that you can kind of tweak things. But yeah, I think the team at Great River Learning kind of helped me with that. So I'll kind of just share some things that they shared with me. And it was kind of starting with that outline of the chapters. And so, certainly, I would hope whoever's writing a book, it's for a course you feel really comfortable in. You've taught it a few times. You already have an idea of what works and doesn't work, right? So, pull upon your experience and recognize that you bring so much to it. But kind of organizing it, refining it, maybe not getting too lost at first, because there were a couple of topics where I felt like I could reorder them. We could
Mhm.
do this and then this because so much feeds off each other in mathematics. That was actually a big challenge for me for a couple of the chapters was kind of how I wanted to structure it in terms of the order. But really, I think about your class, what went well, what you liked and why when you're kind of doing that outline. And then the other advice I'll pass along, don't start with chapter one. And I thought
Mhm.
that that was really good advice. I've never written a book of any kind before. I actually love creative writing as well, but I've never written a novel. I've never written anything, and I'm always kind of going off of someone else's work when I'm
Mhm.
organizing my classes. And that was really good advice. I did it, I followed her advice. I know what I know. She knew what she knew and we discussed that. But then at the same time, having not had chapter one, recognizing it's okay to then say, all right, now that I kind of recognize this was said here, this isn't the first time, we're kind of making modifications, but don't start with chapter one. That was some of the best advice I got, I think, in the process.
Yes, that is a good one because we consider chapter one and the very last chapter kind of the bookend chapters. They're not necessarily representative of the actual chapters themselves. So to pick one in the middle and pick one that's your favorite topic, one that's going to be essentially easy to write because you know it so well, and then evolve from there. So along those lines, this is one of my favorite questions to ask an author is if we ran into a student of yours 3 or 4 years down the road and asked them about your course, what would you hope they would tell us what their takeaway was?
I think that I would hope that they would say that they appreciated the details, that the explanations, that it wasn't just here's the answer, that we really talked about where things came from. I'm a talker. I love to converse with people. I love that I get to talk for a living. And so I can sometimes go on and I kind of tell my students that. But I hope that they see the value in it when I kind of go through. We did this in class just this week talking about the domain and range of different types of functions. I could have just said, here's the list. Here it is. Remember it, okay? But I wanted to talk through it so that it didn't feel like memorizing. I don't like to memorize, and I hate that I do have to ask my students to remember certain things. I mean, I don't think that's ever going to fully go away from some expectations I have, but that they appreciated that. Maybe not every single time I went into the background of something, but that they saw the value of kind of where these facts or where these big ideas come from. Because that was one of the things that I've been trying to do since I started teaching this course is this is college algebra. We've got to do some deeper diving into this content.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping that they appreciate that. And now that we have
Yeah,
more
that
of
would
this
be the highest
application
compliment, I
focus. Hopefully
think,
they
to
remember
receive from a
some
student
kind
for
of
sure.
neat
One of the last
application
questions
that
we
they
had, and
hadn't
this is
thought about
going
until
back
that
to,
class,
we talked
whatever it
about
may
kind
have
of the
been. In
shifting
the logarithms, I talk about
experiences of
acids and
students over
bases
the
and
course
earthquakes, and I
of
hadn't
the
even
years
thought
that you've
about
been
that
teaching.
myself. So
One
just
question we
hopefully
have is,
a
as a
little
woman as
additional thing would
mathematics,
be
have you
that there
seen
was
any changes over the
some
course of your
application that
career
they
in
remember.
terms
I
of
have
gender
had a student from
equity?
another class tell
And
me
is
they'll
there
never
any
forget
work
a
in your
particular word
experience,
problem
and
in
this is purely
calculus. So
anecdotal
hopefully
and
that's
unique
happening
to
in
you,
college
that
algebra
needs
too, that
still needs
something
to be
kind of
done?
sticks in that way. I think that's such an interesting question for me because I hadn't really thought about women in mathematics as a minority. until someone kind of verbalized it to me. And I think part of that is the college that I went to, the college I teach at now, and just nationally, more females than males are attending college in terms of the percentage. So I don't think I was feeling that in the classroom per se. Certainly thinking back to earlier years as a student, I probably had no concept of demographics. I was just kind of with my friends and listening. And having studied also secondary education, that was a really big cohort of the mathematics majors. And yes, most of us were female who were going into education. So I think I just had so many females around me doing what I was doing that I didn't really notice the bigger issues because they didn't affect me. And I wasn't reading up on things. I wasn't worrying about all of that. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to get my work done. I'm going to do my best. And then I also, when I arrived at Dominican, the faculty in the mathematics department were predominantly female. And that was not a reason that I chose this job. I chose this university. And again, it wasn't even an anomaly to me when I was interviewing and meeting people. So I think I've just been really blessed personally to have had just a great group around me to support me and not feel like there was a gender issue. But one of the things I actually studied in college, I took a class outside of mathematics and we had to do a project, and it was a class that gender was one of kind of the topics that we were looking at. And so I did take gender and mathematics as kind of my project there. And it was really sad to start reading about it and seeing what was going on, seeing that, females, even if they know the answer, they're going to be less apt to raise their hand. Males, however, will raise their hand even if they're wrong, and they're not affected by that. They're okay to be wrong. And again, this is just broad stereotype. This is not speaking about everyone, just what's out there in the literature that we've seen. And so that saddened me, or just that female voices might be stifled by their male classmates. So I'm trying to look at it in terms of how I can support my students. And so one of the things when I'm looking at the groups that are sitting together, that are hopefully engaging together throughout my class, trying to be kind of aware of that. I did have a class where I was making groups, and I did do some outreach and get some advice for making a group that's going to be successful. And gender did come up, and it was a factor that I had. So I think one of the big things is just to be aware of it. Whether we have done a lot of reading as an individual, our own experience, just be aware. I think that it's out there. We're still struggling as a department on what we can do. So I wish I had answers, because one of the things that we've talked about at times is, as I mentioned, college, predominantly female. My university is about approximately 2/3 female undergraduate, or female presenting, female identifying. And in our lower level courses, we're seeing that dynamic in the classroom. But as we progress through our upper level courses, and I'll just say in mathematics, I don't know that it's true in the other science fields, a switch where we're seeing the two-thirds male. And why is that happening? And I don't have the answer. It's definitely on our radar as a department. And again, we're predominantly female faculty, hoping that might help. I know that we hear about this in all different career aspects. It helps to see someone that you can identify with being successful in something, and that can help just let you know you can get there if you want to, right? And so we have that. We're there. We're in the front of the room. We're saying we like this. It's interesting. We can do it. You can do it. So I think there's definitely still work to be done. And I think one of the things that I would like to do more of is bring in the names of women who are doing great things into the classroom. One of the things that we did for a time, and maybe we'll bring it back, is we would have like a mathematician of the month, and we would put them on our bulletin board. And that could be female, Latina, Black, just it's not all old white men who have made these amazing contributions to our field. Yes, Newton, the big name, sure, a long, long time ago. So I think one of the things I'd like to do, and I think we could all try to do, is just highlight those achievements and bring them into the discussion, into the classroom, our walls. Because it's definitely still an issue, unfortunately. I wish I had a better answer, but just, hopefully also encouraging those females that I see doing such a great job and hope that they persist and they continue.
That makes me think of one of my favorite movies, or current favorite movies, is Hidden Figures.
Yes. Yes. And we actually just had students present on a mathematician. Our seniors did this a few weeks ago, and one spoke about Katherine Johnson. And my children have started bringing home these books. I
So I think
think,
that's
I am
definitely
George
a
Washington.
start.
I
Just
am
the
Martin Luther King.
understanding, the
I am
recognition, and it
Sacagawea.
sounds like
And
your
my son brought
department
home,
is
I am
doing
Stephen
great and
Hawking.
doing
And I
everything
thought,
that
he
you
has
can
no
to
idea
bring
who this
in,
person is. My son's 8 years
anyone who's
old.
interested in
And we read
pursuing that
about it.
career to
So
really lifting
hopefully,
them up, no
doing
matter
those
their
kinds
gender
of little
identity.
things as well. I'm sure there's an I am Katherine Johnson out there, Deanna, but just, yeah, taking those opportunities and talking about it and just saying that's amazing, and making those names roll off our tongue just as much as Newton and Leibniz and Gauss would be
Yes.
great.
Is there anything else before we get to our last question that you want to express about working with GRL or writing, or even just, about the state of academia?
We're trying. I mean, it's a really big task, and it's a daunting task, but it's so important. I think we put a lot of pressure on ourselves because of that, understandably. But yeah, just making those efforts and recognizing a little stride, at least it's a step in the right direction. I'll just say again, it was just such a great experience. And we were just talking about females and gender equities and inequities in mathematics. And I was blessed to have an all-female team. And I thought that that was just really refreshing and nice just to see. I was talking to my daughter recently about, you go to school and you have to listen to your teacher. I have a boss. And I was telling her all the layers, not getting into the nuances of dean and provost and such. And she said to me, "Is the big boss a woman?" I forget the phrase, top boss, big boss. And I said, yes, because the president of my universities, who I was thinking in my head, and we have a female president. And she kind of smiled. And so I think like that was just really nice. I think there was some slight deliberateness there, but obviously just getting a great team. I'll just say it really felt like a partnership. I felt really supported. This was something so new and daunting to me. Amanda in particular was so patient as I really just had to think, can I do this? Because when I commit to something, I want to see it through, and I want to, as I mentioned, I want to be proud of it. But just so supportive. I looked forward to our check-ins. And I think at this point in my career, I hadn't heard a lot of good job. We kind of just get caught in the emotions and just walking down the hallway doing our day in, day out. And so just to say that, to anyone coming back to a question, I'll elaborate on someone who's thinking about doing this. You won't be doing it alone. There was just so much support there. Anytime I had a question, it was acknowledged, it was answered, we talked it out. So I was just so appreciative of not feeling alone in the process.
So we like to wrap up our podcast with this last question, and it's called You Are Wrong. And so it's an opportunity for you to clear up any misconceptions or maybe misunderstandings about mathematics, or what's a pet peeve of yours when it comes to that?
I feel like a pet peeve of mine is just that people kind of walk around, and this is something my colleagues and I talk about, just saying like we maybe don't, it's okay if I'm bad at math, or it's fine, and just kind of brushing it off. We're not really giving it its due, because we kind of will say if someone said they couldn't read, as an adult, I don't think that we would say that was okay. So just maybe not slighting it. I think that that's been something that just kind of bothers me as someone who appreciates math, as an educator, that we shouldn't kind of put a discipline down. And that also, I think that math is either you can or you can't. We got to just kind of try. I think we're all capable. It is its own language, and we talk about that as well. So yes, there's a learning curve, but not to kind of just dismiss it if someone's struggling, but hopefully that we engage with them and say, no, let's talk about this. I bet we can do it. Let's come together. And I think I'm saying that in part too as a mother, as I'm navigating two children who have very different views of education, of mathematics, what we do and don't need to know, but just let's give it some time. Let's give it a little bit of love. It's out there and we do need it. Maybe not all as much as others, but yeah, just kind of giving it a little credit and recognizing it's important. And let's not give up on it. Let's not give up on ourselves when it comes to that, I think.
You're a perfect example of how things can change. You mentioned earlier how math really wasn't your thing, and you let the challenges inspire you.
Exactly. Right. We all can have a bad day. Don't let a negative experience with mathematics also kind of be what you take away. It was my dad, like I said, that helped me with my homework. My mom wanted nothing to do with it, and she was not quiet about the fact that that was not her discipline. She was not a fan of math. And I think it was because she had a negative experience and she let it just taint her whole view of it and couldn't wait to be done with that part of her education. So, yeah, there's so much out there too. I've seen students struggle in one class and then for better or worse, they get to have me again. I've seen them just shine. So, give yourself another chance and give the discipline another chance because there's a lot more out there if you want to just kind of play around and explore.
All right. Thank you very much again for joining us today, Jeanette.
Yes.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Make sure to hit that notification bell after subscribing to our Great River Learning YouTube channel. Our mission is to inspire and educate those in higher education, one insightful conversation at a time. So until next time, thank you for watching and keep thinking beyond the book.